Good afternoon to each one of sorry about that, but a very good afternoon to each one of you. Welcome to the webinar on hybrid work is blended learning the way forward in collaboration with Skillsoft, one of the largest educational tech companies providing learning management solutions and content to a number of clients across the world. My name is Devipya Ajit John, and I'm part of the advisory team at SHR, catering to India and Asia Pacific regions, and I'm the moderator for today's session. Just when organizations were familiarizing their employees to the online learning over the last 1.5 years, the constantly evolving workplaces are further forcing L&D teams to rethink their learning strategies, and I'm sure all of you would agree with me on that. Organizations are talking about blended learning over quite some time now. One is still expected to organize and deliver these formal structured classroom sessions, but when this component is shrunk only to 10% of the learning, organizations have to think carefully what those sessions would look like and what are they supposed to achieve when the workforce is completely hybrid and dispersed. To further explore and learn about how organizations are and can leverage blended learning for their unique workforce requirements, especially in the future context, we have amidst us our esteemed speakers, Mr. Jalidi M. Thakkar, General Manager, Learning and Development, Tata Motors. Welcome, Jalidi, to the session. We also have with us Anil Santapuri, Director, Learning and Development, CGI. Welcome, Anil. And we have with us the Managing Director, India, Skillsoft and SumTotal, Mr. Kamal Datta. Welcome to all our esteemed panelists. During the course of this discussion, I request the audience to share with us your viewpoints, your thoughts, your questions that you have for our panelists on the chat feature on the Zoom, and we will ensure to address them over the course of this session for sure. Without further ado, even before we begin into the panel discussion, we definitely would like to hear what our audiences think on the said subject. And on that note, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to share my screen to showcase to you a Menti word cloud. And I would want each one of you to go into your laptops, your mobile phones, type in www.menti.com. It's right there on the top of the screen, and use the code 50670753. I hope all of you have got it. I'm just putting it on the chat as well. It's www.menti.com. And the passcode is 50670753. So please go ahead and do this and share with us what are some of your thoughts on what are the different considerations for effective blended learning journey, especially in the future context for organizations. So can we have some responses out here, please? I hope all of you have got it right. It's menti.com and the code is 50670753. And all that you need to do is plug in one or two words in terms of what do you think are some of the considerations for effective blended learning journey in the future. So I don't see any responses. I'm not sure if there's a technical challenge out here. Let's just give it a second and then move into the panel discussion. We'll come back to this once again. Okay, so we do have a couple of participants sharing. It's all about how the blended learning journey can be engaging for the participants, how it is more role-based or contextual, absolutely, and how the peer learning can be enabled, and that's something that's been a top priority in today's context, and I completely agree with that. Any other inputs, please, from the audience? So what we would do is that, given the paucity of time, we'll keep this open. Please let your responses get pouring in. And on that note, I'm going to stop sharing the screen and I'm going to get into the panel discussion very quickly. And my first question goes to you, Jalidi. So given that the talent is shaping up very differently and is viewed in different contexts, especially today as we speak, how is the learning methodology going to change? And when we talk about the word blend, how do you think this blend can be made relevant in the emerging talent mix? So any thoughts from your end, Jalidi, considering that you're coming in from a manufacturing sector as well? Over to you, Jalidi.
Sure, Dedu. Just a quick check. Am I audible, visible?
Very much, very much.
Okay, great. So first of all, thank you for this opportunity and a very warm welcome to all our colleagues who have joined us today. Very interesting and insightful topic, Dedu, I must say. Blended learning is something which is like a way of life going forward. We've also seen some of the inputs which came up on the screen, and they definitely allude to what's in it for every learner when it comes to the blend. When you look at the the horizon of business or economy shaping forward, usually we talk of three things. One is work, second is workplace, and third is workforce. Right? It's an intersection of these elements. Talent of today, by and large, has picked up these nuances very well. They know very clearly that ultimately the onus of learning lies on each one of us, and that's the reason why all the experiences that the talent has gathered so far, they want to see that manifested in the type of learning that comes to them, and that's where the whole genesis of blend makes it very interesting and insightful. When we look at the a typical manifestation of blend, what typically happens is it provides something for everybody. The wholesome idea is that whatever may be your learning style, whatever may be your experience so far, in whatever way that you have learned or acquired learning so far, it has a place for everyone. So that's why this blend has been successful to whatever percentage that the companies have embraced. And it is going to be successful in future because people are looking at blend as something which is like an umbrella, right? An umbrella offering which helps the talent to try, test it on their own. It also, in a way, keeps the control within their hands. It's something where I'm not dependent on something. I myself take the accountability of my own learning. So I think these are few elements which I see shaping up, given the scenario today, overall in business, in terms of learning, in terms of how the organizations are shaping up, and the agility with which people are embracing learning. I think blend is here to stay, and blend is something which is, I would say, very categorically positioned for a long journey ahead. So that's my view.
Yes, thanks a lot, Jalidi. Couldn't agree with you more. As I said in the beginning, blended learning has been the key word quite some time now, over a decade, but today it's gained a lot of importance, and wherein we are trying to interweave that with a lot of mobile-led learning, a lot of classroom, so as many learning elements that we can to provide that variety for our learners, and that's how the effectiveness also comes in. So on that note, Anil, my next question goes to you, considering that it's a tech company, CGI, but having said that, you have made some great investments for learning, for your learning strategies across your employee base that you have. So what do you think are some of the top considerations for blended learning that an L&D team needs to consider? So what are your thoughts, and what are some of the best practices, if you could share on the same?
Thank you. Thanks for the questions. First of all, good afternoon to the participants and my co-panelists. Really happy to be here. And I would like to just pick and continue on where my co-panelist left. So blend learning is definitely already in place. It's a way forward. What I would like to do is pick on something he cited. He spoke about learning journey. So generally, when we talk about blend, we fall into the trap of saying, hey, we're going to throw in multiple methods into it. Let's bring a mobile app. Let's do this. Let's do that. So, which is all fine. But if we actually take a step back, it's all about learning journey. What's the learning journey a learner needs to go through? And a great example, which sits well with everyone, is a new hire onboarding. If we take example of a person of a new hire who's onboarding, you can break it down to, let's say, 4 phases. How do you engage a new hire pre-onboarding, after they receive their offer, till before they join? And let's say the joining day, let's call it joining day, the welcome day. What experiences do they need to have on welcome day? Likewise, what experiences and outcomes do we need to do with them for first week, 1 month, and first 3 months, let's say? If you kind of break it down to those 4 phases, and each phase identify what's the outcome. Like on a welcome day, you want your new hires to have a wow experience, make them feel wow, make them feel welcomed, learn about the organization, have interface with new leaders. So those become the outcomes. So the way you kind of expand on the small example I mentioned, that gives us the entire learning journey of any journey, and depends on what outcomes are you trying to achieve, what objectives are for the initiative. So creating that learning journey becomes really critical. Then comes 3 steps, asking 3 questions to enable this learning journey. What learning channels do I need? What learning methods do I use? And what technology features I need? And quickly give some examples. So learning channels typically fall into categories of ILT, VLT, classroom, webinars, online learning, portal e-learning, MOOCs, or these days also AR, VR. Whereas learning methods are action learning, gamification, coaching, mentoring, on-the-job learning, peer learning, simulations, communities of practice. Talking about features, LXPs, badges, localization, translations, learner-created content, and these just analytics plays also play a big role. So if I had to sum it up, getting very specific about what the learning journey is, breaking down to its phases, outcomes, then looking at it, what channels do you need, what methods do you need to apply, what features, then you have a full solution in hand from a blended learning perspective.
Sure, thanks a lot, Anil. Thank you for sharing those 3 considerations. Kamal, I would go in next for you to help me understand and help the audience understand. You've been working with a lot of clientele for the last couple of years in the space of learning and development, and also from a tech education perspective as well. So what do you think are some of the challenges that you have heard from your contacts, your networks, in terms of executing this blended learning approaches, especially in the context of different workforce categories, whether it's your frontline workers, your remote workers, or your hybrid workforce, and that's how the workplaces are today. So what are some of the challenges when it comes to blended learning approach in the context of these different workforce categories, and also the different employee personas that organizations witness today? Over to you, Kamal.
Yeah, thanks, Edu. I think I will take on from where Jalati and Anil already talked about, but I would like to step back before I do that, just to build the context for those listening in. We always had classroom and instructor-led and variety of different methods of training. What we have seen, and I think pandemic was a key driver why we are talking about blended again, is because we have seen that e-learning and anything which is non-classroom based or instructor can scale and engage and is a viable method forward. So the discussion is not whether e-learning is moving to blended or instructor is moving to blended. I think the need of the hour is to scale, basically, and do it as fast as possible, do it at minimum cost, and do it with a sense of urgency. Sense of urgency because 2-3 things. With this pandemic came talent mobility. People moved locations. There was within the organization mobility, priority changed for the organizations and the individuals. That's one part. Then the second part is around talent war and the rise of this great resignation period and so on and so forth, which means both talent retention as well as onboarding became immensely important. And the key driver for that was really the pace of digitization that was happening across the organizations that I spoke to, be it the pace of automation, be it the pace of adoption of emerging technologies like big data, AI, etc. So all of this has created a perfect storm where L&D teams have recognized that no one way is really going to help them move forward at the speed their CEOs, their business leaders need them to. I think that is driving this transformation. We always understood that there is an experiential part of learning. There is an ability to influence and contribute to the content that you are being taught, and embrace that knowledge and create the repositories with that understanding and application of that particular knowledge, all of which was very hard for just to be done in e-learning. More so, we have been sitting alone in our homes or largely been, socially cut off to a certain extent, where I think we have not got the opportunities that we got in the past to reflect, to share, to discuss, to collaborate, to engage, to practice, to experiment, and all of those things, which was very natural to the workplaces of the past. As a result, I think those learnings that happen from all of those elements are necessary, I would say, and they need to be bought into the way we plan our future training. And the only way you can do that is to get those along with the e-learning benefits that we have seen and get a mix of those. That is where the blended. Now, the challenges are, as Anil correctly said, that we need to really look at what are the things, ultimately the classroom is no longer a place, it's an experience. You will always have different modalities to consider, including gamifications and simulations and experimental practice and labs and boot camps and hackathons, and there are a variety of different ways a blend can work. It is not only about a sage on the stage with e-learning as a facilitation. You have to think of the mix, correct mix, which really captures all the benefits we spoke about, where you can explore the content in a different manner, contextualize it to the environment that you are in and the role that you are in, but more importantly, give back your experience, influence the thought process, influence the knowledge that is being created, clarify your doubts, clarify and share and reflect, basically. And if you can do all of that in a course, I think those are very powerful ingredients for lifelong learners, basically. So those are, in my mind, some of the challenges to blend it perfectly, to have that knowledge and experience of doing it in the fashion which draws the audience and drives the right engagement. Because we all know, in e-learning, there has been challenges around course completions, etc. In instructor-led, those are costly, time-consuming, and not very effective. So the blend was a viable path forward, but more so now than any time before, as organizations look to scale onboarding and need to train and reskill and upskill at scale.
Sure, thanks a lot, Kamal, and I completely agree with you. While blended learning journey is the key, it's also about how do you create those. And today we are using the word hyper-personalized very effectively, not just in you're not just talking about candidate experience, but it's also about learning and development across the talent management life cycle, wherein we are trying to understand how do you create those hyper-personalized learning journeys or blended learning journeys for your workforce, for your different employee personas. And that's a challenge in itself. It's not going to come in easy. And that's where the L&D teams and organizations are working towards. So thanks a lot for that. The next question goes in for all of you. Maybe we could begin with Jaladi once again, is that this is the time wherein we would want you to share whatever you can share in terms of how do you go about crafting these blended learning journeys, which are very in a hybrid setup or a virtual context, more specific. And if you can share as many best practices that you can, please, for our audience, maybe from your organization or also whatever you've learned.
Sure. So I think I would say very interesting insights brought in by Anil and Kamal. And let me see if those can be reflected, and then probably we can look at a mix which I think most of us, or rather all of us, are using in our own organization in multiple ways. See, one very I would say flexibility that blend provides is that you can dabble with anything and everything, right? You have so many avenues which you can co-create. You can mix and mash and kind of bring up a good learning avenue. As even Kamal said, we can look at it need not be only e-learning. We can use some part of e-learning. We can use some part of virtual masterclass. We can use some part of Leader Connect. We can use some part of even hackathons and keep people engaged. So so we went about okay, I mean, if I have to just cite an example, all organizations are faced with these challenges. We were also, impacted by this at Tata Motors. So, and when you look at a manufacturing organization, broadly the employee base is highly kinesthetic, and that's where the understanding of training is more in terms of the feel of the learning, the feel of training, participation, experiencing, and that is what creates a sustainable learning for them. Now, suddenly you are hit with a virtual, and you have to kind of go along multiple ways to create an impactful journey. And that's where we used a combination of blend in one of, so for example, as we know, people managers is a very critical cohort, in any organization. Anybody who is having a responsibility of people in the organizations becomes very critical, because he not only has to manage his or her functional avenues, but also the team under him or her. So here we used a kind of a blend which was very simple. One is we tried using a virtual classroom, which is a master class, say around 2.5 hours. Then we went into creating those very small, minor, WhatsApp kind of groups where people keep huddling. That's also, if you ask me, in one way, it's a social learning platform. We also reached out in terms of creating some learning nudges through an app. Of course, with the partnership of a very able service provider. And then we also connected this back to our leaders, our business leaders, functional leaders, who actually stepped in and spoke on those topics to our employees, or rather our people managers. So just by looking at these 3-4 avenues, we can really experience the power of a blend in an organization. So this is one such example which comes to my mind. Of course, we have used a couple of places where we have used e-learning courses as well. But just to give a perspective on blend, I think even with these simple 3-4 things, you can create a good, impactful offering.
I just have a follow-up question to that, Jalati. While yes, you did speak about blend and it's working brilliantly well, how different is this going to be for your frontline employees, the ones who are actually there in the plants? So any differences there, and how did you actually capture their attention and engagement?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question. And as I said, there are certain industries or certain business processes which are very kinesthetic in nature. And so therefore, in order to learn those processes, the training also have to be designed accordingly. So while there is, when you look at the frontline employees, there is definitely a in-person, inexperienced training, which builds your functional capability and skills of doing work. This has no shortcuts. You have to create avenues where people actually can practice, people can actually kind of be there, work around, and then translate the skills into actual deliverables. So this was something where it's something which is non-negotiable. You can't replace it with it can't be all things virtual, right? So this was one element which we faced. But yes, when it comes to a certain portion of soft skills, a certain portion of professional or behavioral skills, or a certain portion of skills which you can consume by, let's say, read, watch, listen. These are few avenues where those were leveraged, those were experimented. If you ask me in terms of the percentage of impact, may not be much, but yes, at least for the times that we were, last 1.5, 2 years, at least it served its purpose. And therefore, actually, the whole appreciation and acceptance of blend became very critical. Before that, people, since the learning was so superlatively classroom, people never sort of appreciated the concept of blend. But I think with this evolution, people did started looking at a blend as one of the doable, reachable, sociable method of designing learning journeys. So sure, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thanks a lot, Charity, for that. I think the same question goes to you in terms of how do you go about creating this blended learning journeys. If you can share examples, you can share best practices, especially from CGI, because I know CGI has been doing some great work, as well as overall in the services sector or the technology sector that you can speak about.
Thank you. First of all, it was very enlightening to hear insights from Jalati from the manufacturing sector. Thanks a lot for those. So I think from a services sector, there's always been technology adoption has always been there from a learning perspective. But let me start from talking about personas. Let me start with a small, my own personal learning, which happened in 2016, 2017, when I was working for a global fintech major. Back then Blend was not so famous, but we did have this Blend program, which was like 1 year long. Blended learning program, self-paced with some webinars, was a basic program for individual contributors. Then I joined and took over the program. Then 1 year was too long, so we made it 6 months, and the adoption increased. Earlier, initially adoption was 10-15%, then it became 50% completion and adoption. Then we further fine-tuned second iteration, made it a 3-month program, 3 to 4 months. Then the adoption completion jumped up to 75%. Instantly, most of the program self-paced content was coming from Skillsoft. So that's how we kind of arrived at the duration 3 to 4 months. But at the end of the year, when we're doing some ROI study, we stumbled across a very interesting insight. The insight was we found we never called these programs blended back in the day. We used to call them long duration programs. So what we found was all the people who attended long duration programs, their retention scores were higher. So without knowing, we actually found a mechanism of how to engage and also retain talent back, 5 years back, but it's so relevant today. So just bringing that personal story. So with that personal experience and learning, I've been applying blend learning over the last many years in every organization I work for. So at CGI, we do a lot of work in this space. And to explain it, I would like to break it down to 3 personas. So you have an individual contributor persona, let's say graduates or people who are junior in their roles, is one kind of a persona. Then we have a manager persona, people who are in managerial role, mid-management, and then you have leadership persona. So generally, most programs revolve around these 3 personas, and different personas have different needs from a blend perspective. Now, for somebody who's an individual contributor, junior, and I assume the training is more technical in nature, and as Jalji was mentioning, when you do webinars and VILTs, you can go up to 3-hour and 4-hour sessions, like half-day sessions. But when you flip it and look at a leader, what we realized is a 90-minute session is enough for them. If it's live contact session, like a live virtual session, we call it a master class. So the format is also slightly different. It's more kind of a teacher-led or instructor-led program. For individual contributors, it's more an master class, keynote kind of a version for leaders. And for managers, it's a combination of activities and breakouts and things like that. So one is the guiding principles stay the same, but depending on the persona, you need to adapt and tune what you need for them. So if I take 3 specific examples, and I'll maybe if I have time, I'll go down one use case. So we do a graduate onboarding program, like most IT services organizations. It's a 12-week program, completely blended. Last year and this year we did completely blended. So assuming this engineering graduates straight out of college didn't even come to our office campus, sitting at home and going for 12 weeks training to learn, to be ready to get deployed in the project. So imagine cultural integration, technology learning, on the job, project exposure, all that's happening virtually. So 12 weeks of blind learning, that's like one use case which we have been successfully able to do. It's in fact that program won a Brandon Hall Gold Award last year. And another program which we have been actually working with SHRM is Managed as a Coach, where it's a 4-month program where we have 7 sessions, 3 to 4 hours each. And then an important component of the program, since it's a coaching skills, it's a skills program, it's not a mindset program, is the entire program is built through participants are paid up in triads. So 3 people each are grouped, and they do a lot of practice sessions, both during sessions and after, between. So between sessions also, they need to meet offline and do practice sessions. And in the end, they actually have to do a coaching session, which is recorded and shared with the facilitator, who kind of, grades it or gives it scores. And just 30 seconds, we also have a top talent program for senior leaders based on, building leadership pipeline for senior roles, director and VP. That's where the program actually runs for 12 to 18 months, because we look at the strategic needs of the group, 15 to 20 people, and then a blend learning is designed for 12 to 18 months, in which the last component is actually action learning, where they're actually given real business problems in which they have to, solve the real business problems in 12 weeks, 3 months. So again, different personas have different needs. And again, going back to what I mentioned earlier, once we figure this out, all the right plugins come in terms of, whether you need gamification, coaching, mentoring, badges. Badges generally work well with individual contributors, on the job learning, access to mobile, all that features, those 3 aspects of which learning channel to use, which learning method, and which LMS feature to use, definitely falls in place. One quick comment I'll make before I wrap up is, we've been using the new LXP platform from Skillsoft for last 1.5 years, Percipio, and the badges feature in the platform has been so engaging for our junior workforce, let's say millennials and Gen Z, that for a workforce of close to 17,000 people in last 18 months, we actually created over 350 or 400,000 badges, which is completely 400,000 courses on the platform. So I believe the whole aspect of gamification is really working well from an LXP elements perspective. I wanted to cite that example also. Thank you, David. I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks a lot, Anil. That really helps. Thank you for sharing so many use cases, and that's what we are looking out for. Kamal, the same question goes to you, but I would like you to focus across all the industries that you would like to touch upon in terms of how blended learning journeys have benefited organizations, and more so even from a tech perspective. Over to you, Kamal. You're speaking on.
Sorry, it's very similar to what Anil and Jagadi has already spoken about. I think if you look at it from the context of you need to know what, you need to know who, you need to know how to do the job, I think blended learning does all the three basically. And that's the objective of from a design consideration point of view. Now, whether you design it from IT context or a pharma or automotive sector, it doesn't really matter because those considerations kind of remain common. Now, what I have seen is that we have to be careful. The only word of caution is there is no one solution which will fit all learning needs of an individual. If you reflect on your own past, all of us in this forum, and you realize that there were different forms of learning, of course, blended being one part of it, but that was not the only thing. You learned by doing stuff, right? So like Anil mentioned that, the rubber hits the road when you start getting into your role, and then you discover things which you do know, and then you also discover what you don't know. And maybe there are areas which you don't know. So the guides at this stage are typically your peer, your social network, your community. So I think your networking, your external and internal both within and outside the organization are very important elements, and whether they can be brought into blended or not, perhaps is a question that we can take a poll on. But I think that element need to be considered as well. There is a level of curiosity-based learning that we all have. That may not form a blended learning course. It's just about knowing stuff, basically, where we can have elements of micro-learning on the device, on the phone, in the flow of work, etc., etc. And maybe some part of it can be blended, right, in these programs as well. And third is the doing part of it. As Anil said, I'm a great fan of believing that you need to practice. Because no matter how much you have, your retention greatly enhances once you practice or share knowledge or teach, basically. So I think if you can blend all of this, you will get an outcome which is perhaps material to everybody in the organization, right from a blue-collar worker in automotive sector, right to the leadership. But I do recognize that, yes, mixing these many elements can be challenging. It is tough. It's very resource heavy. And this is where we are trying to bring in, having supplied e-learning, these digital badges, the in-platform nudging that Jaladi mentioned, those things can really ease out some of the engagement. They act as drivers for engagement. What we see as a future from here is more in-platform based, which requires less resources to facilitate few of these areas, but then you fall back on that stage for few other things, as well as mentors, coaches, SMEs. I mean, they are invaluable in any organization. You still need those. So I think I agree completely with Jaladi and Anil, and I would like to just offer this additional perspective from design perspective, based on my interactions, because not every organization has been able to execute or design a well-executed blended program. and absent which some of the material benefits that could have potentially been realized have been missed out. From a Skillsoft point of view, I think what we are trying to do now is we had obviously a catalog of e-learning. Anil, thanks for the badges. I noted it down, 4,000 badges. That's a great affirmation for the work being done. But we do realize that, people do need to clarify doubts. They do need to engage, ask questions, clarify doubts, contextualize, and there are various other things that needs to be considered. So we are bringing in instructors, facilitators, and different elements, because it's not only about just this portion, right? It's about gamification. It's about having the knowledge repositories and analytics, and it's about access to experts. It's about on the job. It's about reflection. And it's about all this and brainstorming and more. And how much of that can be done through mobile and platforms, and how much of that requires facilitation. I think those kind of balances need to be drawn, particularly now, because what I'm seeing, particularly in some of the IT segment that I interact with, is this huge skill shortage where you are not getting fit for purpose skills. If we were getting fit for purpose skills, maybe the level of upskilling and reskilling that you need to do is of a behavioral and soft skills and other type of skills. But when the candidate themselves who are joining in are not fit for purpose, then you need to have onboarding at a scale which gets them to a quick billing cycle from the skilling side. So that is the sense of urgency. And I think blended is being considered as the only way forward versus any other approaches at this time.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Kamal, for that. Yes, sorry. Anil, please go ahead.
Yeah, just two quick comments which resonated a lot with what Kamal mentioned. I thought I'll add before I forget. I think, use these two words, upskilling and reskilling. So we kind of use it very often, but just upskilling is more performance driven, short-term needs, which generally emerge from project or current team. Reskilling is more peeping into the future. That's how you kind of started the session. So I think there's a great, let's say if there's an urgent need for certain skills on a project or already working on a team working on a project, the easiest way to do it is bring them to a classroom, 2 days and finish it. But if I'm trying to build a new skill for the future, and I have a couple of months or 6 months as a horizon, the best solution is blended, right? That's what blended, and the platform with which Kamal was talking about makes so easy to scale it. And that's the strategy CJ have been applying successfully over the last couple of years. So I wanted to say, and blend, and once you use, going back to the earlier research I spoke about, which I stumbled across, and when you use, let's say you identify a top talent in your company, and you are reskilling them for a future skill set, and you put them on a blend learning for 4 months, you're also engaging them. So the chances of retaining them also higher. So that's one thing which quickly resonated. The second piece is how the platforms help scale. And I have a short, simple use case there. So, we used to do a lot of classroom day-long behavioral skills trainings where you have maximum 20, 15, 30 people. And how can you cover when you have an employee base of 17,000, how can I cover? So that was the old way of doing things. But just 2 months back, we launched a program on growth mindset at CGI, completely platform-based with a bunch of master classes thrown in. The cohort batch had 600 people signed up. So 600 people are going through the journey together. If I had to do it in a traditional classroom where I had to run 20 batches, which would take me a whole year, but in one batch, I'm covering 600 people. So at scale, preparing for future, blend is a great, method, I would say. Those are two quick things I wanted to share, which resonated a lot. So.
Thanks a lot, Anil. The last use case was bang on in terms of scalability. And I think today a lot of organizations are also talking about having that digital mindset, and thereby that's one of the reskilling or the future skill that organizations are looking forward to in the new candidates as well as the existing employees to further reskill them. And also from a blended learning perspective, while we have a lot of elements, it's all about trying to narrow down and get to that optimum level of elements. So how do you decide how many elements is a threshold beyond which it becomes an overdose for the person and it's no longer effective? So we may have about 10, 12 of learning elements, but Is that what is the requirement? Is that becomes an overdose for the given employee persona that we are dealing with? And I think that's one of the key challenges as well that I keep hearing from most of the L&D heads and organizations as well. My next question is all about technology, because that's the key word for the future, and even today and over the last decade as well. So the question is open to every one of you to help us understand what has been the role of technology specifically in the learning journeys. How is it that you have leverage? You've given a lot of examples in terms of gamification, the digital badges, leveraging Skillsoft. Anything more specific use cases that you can share with us in terms of how organizations have leveraged technology for their learning journeys?
I don't know about, I don't know about what Anil and Jalati are going to say, but I must mention a conversation I was having yesterday. And the question was, now that Facebook is Meta and so much talk on metaverse is happening, how do we use that in our blended learning? So that's a cue for Jaladi and Anil to think about, but I'll let them go on this.
Absolutely, that's been the talk of the town since day before yesterday last night. Day before yesterday night, in fact.
Okay, so let me jump in on that. So thanks. I think very different perspective, Kamal. It's like actually a cue to keep thinking and keep reflecting what combinations you can actually evolve when we look at the evolving face of technology. Okay, just a couple of things. See, one of the thing which really when you look at technology, I think Anil, you mentioned multiple times, the advent of LXP is really taking a great shape. It's more about technology is evolving at a very fast pace. It's all on a platter. It's for the L&D teams and the employees to kind of fail and fail fast. I would put it that way. Experiment. Be open. Be vulnerable. So some of the I would say some of the use cases, if I talk about from Tata Motors, there have been cases where use of simulation, a complete program which is run on simulation for 3.5 hours, where and these are behavioral simulations, right? So these are not something which are on technical or functional skills, and they have shaped up very well. We experimented with this. We never thought a few years back that a simulation can actually suffice for a behavioral program, but today it is working very well in the organization. When you look at different modalities of a program. So for example, as Kamal was mentioning, one program having a blend of mentoring, coaching, master classes, leader connects, all of these are actually, as we speak, they are actually being part of some of the other offering within the organization. So I would say technology is shaping up at a rapid pace. There are some organizations, as Anil said, and as Kamal also mentioned, there are some organizations which are very close to technology. And their business processes are based around technology, which means a natural alignment of their learning and development programs would be around technology. But even for those sectors which are typically are kind of I would say brick and mortar or very, very hard product based, there also, if you see the supply chain, or you see the business process evolution, or when you look at even going further, and Dedu, you are talking about digitization also going forward, when we look at industry 4.0, these are all avenues where you get a good chance of using the technology to kind of experiment, as I said, to kind of fail fast, to embrace something. What happens is, whenever there's an experience which is provided to employees, even if 70% of that doesn't stay, at least 20-30% of that will stick. And if that what sticks can make a difference for the next step. So I think this is how we should look at technology. This is how we should embrace technology. It's not about a competition where which sector or which company has embraced it more. It's about making the employees comfortable with that way of learning, because that is going to be the future. And if they embrace it more and more, the advantage is your blend will keep evolving more and more, and you will be able to use different combinations within the blend. And ultimately, that would be a way to go. As Anil said, if you have to reskill, and that also, if you want to make it scalable, it's lo and behold, this is how you can do it, which was not even thought of before a few years. So I think this is some perspective they do in terms of leveraging technology that I would like to share. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Anil, over to you.
Sure. I think I think greatly articulated by Jalidi. I'll just build on it. So first I'll start by talking about some of the buzzwords which we all keep hearing every day, right? I'll just recite them once more, like blogs, microblogs, wikis, virtual worlds, virtual reality, virtual learning, chatbots, learning experience platforms. We spoke about that. Gamification, user created content, communities of practice, augmented reality, mentoring, peer coaching. These days we talk about AI coaching, adaptive learning, predictive analytics. These are all the thing, MOOCs or recommendation engines. We keep hearing all these terms. That's the hype, right? And there's reality also. But what I want to do is kind of take it to the next perspective. And here, this is where I'm going to refer to the great work done by Bob Mosher. It's called Five Movements of Needs, Five Movements of Learning Needs. It's a very simple framework. It says for every learner, there are five moments of learning needs. First moment is when I'm learning something for the first time. So that's the first moment of need. Second moment of need is when I want to learn more. I already know a topic, I want to learn more. So I've learned, I want to learn more, is second moment of learning need. The third moment of learning need is when I'm applying what I'm learning. I have questions or I want clarified. While applying, that's the third moment of learning need. Fourth is when I'm applying, things go wrong. Things don't go the way it's supposed to happen. I have to problem solve. That's the fourth moment. And finally, when the context changes completely, when things change. So these are the five moments of learning. Traditionally, classroom training or typical e-learning addresses the first one, learning for the first time, right? Come to the class, learn a topic, or here's the e-learning, learn by yourself, go to the portal, go to YouTube, learn on WhatsApp or whatever, right? We all do a good job with that. But through blend learning, you need to answer these five questions also. If somebody is learning for the first time, yes, let's do this. But they want to learn more after they go and leave a classroom. You want to expand on the existing knowledge base. That's when you can build an online learning plan and say, hey, go and read more here. Now, that's where e-learning with second level of interactivity, simulations, as Jalali was saying, can be included, infographics, so on and so forth, videos, animations, scenario-based learning. And then OJT, when people are actually applying what they learned and they stumble. So applying what you learned, the application phase is the third moment of learning. That's where they need quick recall, job aids, so bite-sized learning, how to do videos or documents, job aids, FAQs, product summaries. And those could be the best way to provide that is through a mobile app, right? I can quickly pull it up where I'm working on my laptop. I can open my mobile app, look at the job aid, the step-by-step instruction, do it. So that's like the third example. Then fourth is problem solving. When things go wrong, I'm trying to do something, when things go wrong, that's when I need access to experts or a networking group, a community of practice where I go and post my challenge saying, hey, I'm writing this piece of code, it's going wrong, or I'm trying to give feedback to my team member like this, it's not sitting well, what do others think? So peer learning from experts, that's where blogs, videos, or all the chat groups, communities of practice come in. And when things go wrong, in the context changes, like what happened with pandemic, right? We all need to come back to the classroom, as they say, or come back together and say how we can rethink things. So that's where, again, peer-to-peer information sharing, maybe even coming back to classroom. So I just wanted to bring this perspective saying, yeah, all the technology features which I mentioned above, which earlier we hear a lot, but we need to apply it through a methodology. And Bob Mosher's 5 moments of learning need is a good one. And then the technology falls in places, and I think I completely endorse what Jaladi mentioned. It's not a rat race to implement all the available features in the world in your organization and say, hey, let's have the latest app, latest feature, this and that. It's all about which of those makes sense in the moments of learning need, which of those will add value for the learner in the learning journey. When you design the learning journey, then you bring those features, into your blend solution. So I don't kind of long-winded, but just wanted to lean on a methodology to kind of explain how we hear a lot of hype, but what's the best way to apply some of it. Hopefully that helps.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Anil. Kamal, any inputs to add on, please?
No, I think Anil mentioned everything that basically there was to mention, basically. The only thing I would like to say is maybe I can take a step further from here and say that what lies in the future, basically, right? As you see, the LXPs are now being integrated into where the worker is and what he's doing. So if he is on Teams and a call like this, integrated at Teams level or Microsoft 365 level, or just bring that learning, make it seamless with his work. Or that is one part of it. Overall, I agree with Anil that there is lots of technology, and one has to take it with a pinch of salt. I mean, we have been talking about AI-based recommendation. Everybody talks about it. Everybody says they have it. And yet, when you experience Netflix or Amazon and you see the recommendations being provided, you are not completely satisfied with it, right? So these technologies will take time to mature, okay? Not all of them are mature technologies. But the end goal, if there was to one, would be to get to a position where your platform does all the blend for you, identifies based on what drives the best outcome. In a sense, and while L&D will always be there and the teams will be there, can we do the entire blending for that individual based on his personalized choices, provide him with the nudge, help him engage with the communities, both internal and external, consume the way he wants to, engage the way he wants to, practice and do all those 5 moments through in platform without the need for creating individual buckets within those organizations and then either faltering or failing or succeeding. That we are not there yet for sure, but that would be the end goal of this journey from a tech point of view, where everything is delivered by the platform itself. The platform is self-aware. The platform creates a continuous learning in the enterprise in a blended fashion.
Sure, thanks a lot, Kamal. We've got about 9 minutes, and even before I request Kamal to help us connect the dots and provide a closure for this webinar, a couple of questions that have come in one-on-one to me from the audience, but I'm going to pick up the one which is the million-dollar question in terms of how do you go about measuring the ROI of these blended learning journeys, especially in a hybrid context. So any thoughts on that quickly, and then Kamal, I'll hand it over to you.
Look, ROI has always been challenging, right? From 20 years back, also people were asking about ROI. They'll continue to ask about ROI, right? Not everything can be measured. It's like demand generation. You put a banner out there or a board out there, you can't measure the efficacy of that. Until your demand increases for sales increases, but even then you cannot really pinpoint out there. I think to some extent, we can measure the formal learning ROIs. It's easier. Informal learning is more difficult, but both are equally important. In fact, in some cases, informal may be more important. We have listened to great cases of a janitor in an organization proposing the next big idea to the CEO. So ideas can come from everywhere. Acceleration of ideas through innovation is what organization processes need to modify to be a truly agile organization in general. Now, the point that you're making around ROI, as I said, is difficult to measure. Yes, on e-learning, we can tell you how much is the adoption, how much time consumed, what courses, etc. So those are defined boundaries. You can give that. For informal, as I said, it's harder. For blended, it will be harder to do that unless it's a controlled batch in that sense. But today, if you look at blended being adopted as a way forward from learning itself, both for formal and informal, then I agree that ROI is difficult to establish. What is important is to define some gold standards in the industry from a KPI and ROI measurement perspective. Not everybody should be doing this discovery. And what we have been trying to do is to give a value realization irrespective of the ask or industry by defining certain gold standards in 4 or 5 parameters for any kind of learning that is happening. And those are based on standard data feeds, etc. We are now trying to build that into our platform so that it gets automated dashboards in real time, which the L&D has of any program they're executing in blended fashion, right into the dashboard. So if you, for example, in Percipio, since we spoke about it, you can conduct and schedule a blended learning course. you can get in the dashboard the value realization of that in an automatic real-time manner. So that is where we are going towards. We can't keep measuring based on every individual cases. We have to standardize, develop some gold standards for the industry to measure it, against which a CFO or a financial person can evaluate that. That's what I would say.
Thanks a lot, Kamal. Any quick thoughts from you, Jalati or Anil?
Yeah. So I think Kamal has kind of shared the views on ROI very well. If you ask me, ROI, yes, it has become like a cliche. It is something which I would say, see, if you know your people well, if you know the organizational dynamics and culture, if you know the learning objectives that you are set out for, and if you use the different learning styles that people would embrace and create a blend around that, as long as you are fulfilling all that you have planned for, that's an ROI for me, if you ask me. Because normally in the whole mindset of measurements, we sometimes lose out on multiple avenues where people really feel that, oh yes, okay, at least maybe even if 1 or 2% shifts have happened either in behavior or in skill, that's actually kind of a good utilization of the learning. So I would say that probably we should not. I completely agree what Kamal said. We should not be focusing too much of an ROI based thinking around learning, especially not in case of blend. Blend is at a highly experiential stage for many organizations. If you look at creating a blend and then also look at a very tangible ROI, these two combinations will not work. You will fail somewhere. Either you will end up distorting the blend, or you will end up measuring wrong parameters. So I think keep the basics in place, keep dabbling with technology, keep dabbling with all that platforms, LXPs, digital that is providing. And again, try it out, fail fast, embrace more and more. Even some of the blends fail, doesn't matter. You can use different combinations and keep experiencing or keep experimenting with the users. I think this is what I would like to sum it up.
Thanks a lot. Any thoughts from you, Anil?
Yeah, I'll keep it short. So just endorse everything what Kamal and Jaldi said. So we can't measure ROI for every program. You have to do it for flagship programs. And even if you don't have ROI, please begin with ROE. So return on expectation. Your key program should have a sponsor and at least meet expectation of the sponsor. That's a good tick in the box. And if you do ROI, if you get lucky, so this year, after 2 years of rolling out a reskilling program, which we built on Skillsoft platform, we're actually able to measure ROI, but I don't get to do that every year, let's be honest, but we are actually able to measure ROI and show over 1,000% return on investment. But that can't be done for every program. You have to be careful about that. You can only do for a few. So always good to start with return on expectations. And as rightly said by Jalati, experiment, see, because ROI is on the program, it's not on the method, right? If you do in classroom or blend. But again, going back to earlier point, if the program where I mentioned we got over 1,000% ROI, most of it was because of speed to competence. We trained them on future technical skills, and what we heard from them and their managers is the moment a new project comes in the future skills, they will be able to be deployed faster 6 weeks. So if compare two people, somebody was not trained in this program and somebody was trained, these people could be deployed 6 to 7 weeks faster compared to others. And that's the, you can call it ROI or notional ROI, right? So it's about blend again helps to go at scale, and it with it brings its own ROI. But the program, going back to methodology, right? Program should be strong enough to yield results. Blend is just a method which makes it tighter. So those are just a couple of comments.
Thanks a lot, Anil, for that. Sorry, I just got dropped off momentarily because of my Wi-Fi. But I think at this given point, I think I'll hand it over to Kamal. Kamal, your expert comments in terms of on the said subject as well.
I think the experts have already spoken on this. So great session, Anil, Jaladi, lots of learning. For those attending who had pretty vague ideas about blended or were thinking of looking at blended, I think rewatching this session again will give them a lot of insights and best practices which they can go within the organization with confidence and execute on the program. As I said, from Skillsoft point of view, blended is the way forward for us. We are doing a lot of work around blended, so do explore that. But more importantly, I think some of the gold nuggets that came out of this session, whether it was the 5 moments of learning needs, whether it's Jaladi talking about, don't be too focused on delivering ROI, instead look at ROE, as Anil said. But when you're looking at blended, fail fast, and but you keep trying different technologies. There are metaverse coming our way with augmented reality and virtual reality and job simulations and stuff like that. It's going to be an immensely interesting space, the whole EdTech, in the next 5 to 10 years. And we can imagine that this will be part and parcel of a retention strategy. It will play a role in employee branding, your talent acquisition strategies. So L&D will really be a central theme in developing the competitive advantage for the organization. And blended provides an accelerated way to build some of those experiences for their employers, both from retention and attrition strategies. So I think with that, I know we are up on the time, didn't want to take too long, but there have been so many good things developed and discussed and initiated in this. I wish good luck to everybody doing it. And if there is a way we can help, more than happy to do so. So back to you.
Yes, thanks a ton, Kamal, for the closing comments. And thank you so much, Jaladi and Anil. It's been a wonderful discussion with a lot of inputs and insights from each one of you, as well as thank you so much for sharing the use cases and best practices as well. And that's definitely going to be one of the key takeaways for our audience. So thanks a lot and have a great day ahead. And thank you so much for the audience as well who have joined us today. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.